Public education in America was once hailed as the great equalizer, the foundation of democracy, a path to opportunity for all. But over time, that promise has faded. Crumbling classrooms, underpaid teachers, segregated schools, and unequal funding have all chipped away at the ideal. Today, where a child lives often determines the quality of education they receive. Wealthy families hired private tutors or sent their children to exclusive academies. For everyone else, schooling was sporadic or non-existent. But that began to change thanks to reformers like Horace Mann, who argued that education was a public good, a necessity for democracy and economic progress. In the mid-19th century, Mann championed the idea of the common school, free and open to all children regardless of background. By the early 20th century, every state had laws requiring children to attend school, and the idea of universal, publicly funded education became a pillar of American society. Because public schools rely heavily on local property taxes, the amount of money a school has often depends on how expensive the homes nearby are. In theory, all public schools are created equal. In reality, the quality of education a child receives is directly tied to the wealth of their zip code. In affluent suburbs, schools are flush with resources, small class sizes, experienced teachers, new textbooks, and high-tech facilities. In poorer urban and rural areas, the picture is drastically different. These are publicly funded schools, but they operate independently, free from many of the regulations and oversight that govern traditional public schools. Instead of fixing the public system, we're funneling money into alternatives, creating a two-tiered system where families with time, access, and information can navigate to better schools, while others are left behind. Some charters are run by nonprofits, others by for-profit companies. Debates over curriculum, book bans, history lessons, and gender identity have turned classrooms into political minefields. Teachers are under pressure, school boards are under attack, and students are caught in the crossfire. They often promise innovative teaching methods, higher test scores, and better outcomes, especially for low-income students. And for millions of children, the quality of their education still depends on where they live, not what they're capable of. It can still be the foundation of a stronger, fairer society, but that requires a national commitment, not just to schools, but to every child. Teachers in many states are leaving the profession in droves to low pay, burnout, and lack of support. It's about values, and the question we must ask is simple: do we value every child's future, or just a few? Standardized testing continues to dominate the classroom, often narrowing the curriculum and placing stress on students and teachers alike. Mental health needs are skyrocketing, especially since the pandemic, but schools are struggling to meet them. Schools are underfunded, overcrowded, and lacking in basic infrastructure. While some students logged in from home with fast Wi-Fi and personal laptops, others struggled to find a quiet place to work or any internet access at all. The digital divide is real, and it mirrors the same socioeconomic gaps that have always existed in education. Teachers are underpaid and overworked. Students are expected to achieve at the same level, but with a fraction of the support. Dedicated educators, community schools, early childhood programs, and new investments in equity are making a difference in some districts. It was a slow erosion of funding, of trust, of political will. It was decades of policy decisions that favored some children over others. It was the belief that choice could replace commitment, or that market forces could fix what a public responsibility is fundamentally. Some states have begun to reevaluate how they fund schools, looking for ways to level the playing field. But progress is uneven, and the challenges are deep-rooted. And in many ways, the system meant to level the playing field now reinforces the very inequalities it was supposed to erase. This is the story of how American public education rose to prominence and how it began to fall apart. Charter schools, voucher programs, and privatization were promoted as solutions to the problems of the public system. Supporters argued that competition would force schools to improve. If parents could choose where to send their kids, then bad schools would close and good schools would thrive. Many are selective about who they enroll, and some quietly push out students with disabilities, behavior issues, or low test scores. Meanwhile, when funding follows students to charter schools, traditional public schools are left with fewer resources and the students who need the most help. In the 1800s, public education in America was far from universal. The system wasn't perfect, of course. Many communities still struggled to fund their schools. Racial segregation was deeply entrenched, especially in the South. But overall, the belief that every child deserved an education was gaining ground. After World War II, the federal government began investing more in education. White families fled cities for the suburbs, where new schools were built and district lines drawn to keep communities and classrooms racially divided. These patterns, known as white flight, weren't just social trends. They were shaped by real estate policies, zoning laws, and a school funding system tied to property taxes. The result: wealthier, whiter neighborhoods had better funded schools, while poor and minority communities were left behind. The GI Bill opened college doors to millions of veterans. The 1954 Supreme Court decision in Brown v. Board of Education declared school segregation unconstitutional, ushering in a new era of civil rights and educational equity, at least in theory. By the mid-20th century, American public schools were thriving in many ways. In practice, desegregation was met with fierce resistance. That funding model remains one of the biggest problems in American education today. This system doesn't just create inequality, it institutionalizes it. In the 1980s and 1990s, as concerns about failing schools grew, a new idea began to gain traction: school choice. Charter schools, in particular, became a centerpiece of this movement. But the reality has been mixed. Some charter schools do perform better than their public counterparts. Others perform worse. Critics argue that school choice has become a form of abandonment. At the same time, public schools have become battlegrounds for culture wars. And while all this plays out, deeper structural problems remain. Technology, too, has changed the landscape. Remote learning became a necessity during COVID-19, but it also revealed massive inequalities. There are bright spots. So, what caused the fall of American public education? It wasn't one thing. The consequences are clear. America now ranks behind many developed nations in math, reading, and science scores. Economic mobility is stagnant, but it doesn't have to stay that way. Public education can still be the great equalizer. Because the truth is, the rise and fall of American public education isn't just about policy.